right, Mr. Bellamy. We'll have you down soon. Bellamy's got a lot to do, and I hope that you'll understand. Nobody here to spoil.
Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. Thought I'd better get this one done and dusted because it's Friday today, and tomorrow it's the next UK VC meetup in Leeds. I'm going to be seeing a few of the guys, including my good friend John Bellamy. And I met up with John over the summer and he gave me a big load of VCLT, so I thought I'd better at least make the video showing those records before I meet John tomorrow and we get into the next phase of proceedings. So here we have Nazareth and the album Playing the Game. This is what you can hear in the background. Yeah, what a great picture. They kind of spoil it a bit on the back. But John gave me this and he asked me if I'd heard of them, and I said I had heard of them, but I didn't really know anything about them. If you'd have asked me a few weeks ago, I'd have said Nazareth, maybe an American prog band possibly, but it seems no, they're actually Scottish. I think they're from Glasgow. Okay, so it's their eighth studio album, released in 1976. Yeah, they formed in 1968 and they had several hits in the UK. They established an international audience apparently with their 1975 album Hair of the Dog, which featured their hits Hair of the Dog and a cover of the Ballad of Hertz. So yeah, this is a very, very kind of rough, raw, bluesy rock album from the 1970s. I can exactly hear what John likes about it. It's up John's street. I mean, it's not very proggy. It's quite kind of, yeah, it's raw, I'd say. It's no frills. The singer sounds a little bit Brian Johnson-y. Not quite as kind of high-pitched. This is a cover version of an old R&B song which the Stones covered. Yeah, it's a really good album. I enjoyed it. And this is just one of many albums John gave me. I met John for the first time in Lancaster over the summer. He came to visit, he brought his lovely family with him, and we all got to know each other a little bit. I mean, one day, you know, John's wife and his children. But we had the day together, just me and John. I took him round town and, you know, showed him my haunts, my record buying haunts, you know, charity shops and the like. Showed him a little bit of history and stuff, and then we went to the pub and got fairly sloshed, you know. But before any of that, we kind of went and sat on the town hall steps, and John produced a bag, not the town hall, it was the museum, and we sat on the steps in the kind of square, and he just produced a bag of records and started to hand them to me, just saying, you know, do you have this one? Do you have this one? And if I said no, you know, I got to keep the record, so it was a nice big pile. And this is one of the ones that emerged from the bag. So Nazareth, Playing the Game. Then John was kind enough to give me a copy of Long Player by the Faces. Now, long-term viewers to my channel will know that I've been trying to get to grips with Rod Stewart. John Downing, such pianist, sent me a couple of his albums, and I listened to them and started to enjoy them. Never been a big Rod fan, never been a Faces fan either. I know John is a fan of the Faces, and so I was curious to hear this record, and I thought it was okay. I wasn't kind of knocked out by it. Interestingly, somebody had told me this fact, and I hadn't heard it with my own ears, but it's completely true. The drummer of the Faces, I think, is it Kenny Jones? He has a rather disconcerting way of playing the hi-hat, you know, the hi-hats. He plays them open the whole time, so in all the songs, through all the songs, he's playing this very crashy kind of hi-hat. I've never quite heard anybody do that before. I mean, you know, drummers normally will do that in certain sections of the song in order to lend them a bit of, you know, oomph. But most drummers play with the hi-hat kind of closed or partially closed, and they kind of open it occasionally. But Kenny, he just smashes the hi-hat just constantly and repeatedly through all the songs, and I kind of find it a bit distracting. And I'm not sure if I'd have noticed it quite as much if a friend of mine hadn't kind of told me about it, but he said It's a guy that I used to be in a band with. He said, have you ever heard the Faces? And I said, not really. And he said, interesting drummer, he just kind of smashes his way through all the songs. And I said, right, okay, I'll listen out for that. And he was right. So, yeah, it was okay. Yeah, I'm never going to be a massive fan of Rod Stewart, and I probably do prefer the Small Faces. Well, I do definitely prefer the Small Faces to the Faces. But I mean, you know, a significant band. John Peel loved them. It was about time I had some in my collection, so that is a definite keeper, and I will be listening to it again and trying to get to grips with the strange, crashy hi-hats. Okay, next. Now this one made me laugh. John, bless him, has been trying to get to grips with soul music for a while, but he freely admits it's not really his cup of tea. And he'd seen me talking in a previous video about Barry White, the fact that I'd started to kind of accidentally collect Barry's albums and hadn't really got round to listening to them yet. So John was kind enough to present me with this one. This is Can't Get Enough, which is the third studio album by Barry, released on August the 6th, 1974, and this was ranked number 281 in Rolling Stones magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. And it is a great album, actually. You know, Barry White is one of those artists who maybe he hasn't got as much credibility as, you know, people like Curtis Mayfield and Isaac Hayes. I think maybe because he didn't really venture, well, as far as I'm aware, he didn't really venture much into social commentary and, you know, political music. He didn't really come from that kind of Marvin Gaye school of politically switched on stuff. He was much more in the kind of lover, you know, ladies man soul tradition, you know, and you know, the songs are all very kind of slow and they build and it's kind of smoochy. I mean, you know, basically it's music to seduct your girlfriend, wife, whatever, you know, boyfriend. No, I think it's girlfriend with Barry White. You know, it's all kind of, you know, baby and lady and all this, and you kind of light a candle. It's almost, it seems a little bit wrong to listen to it kind of on your own. It does sound like the kind of music you should have on in the background while, you know, certain things are going on.
Baby, that's all of me to you. I've been blessed. I swear to God, I've been blessed. Because I've got you.
But it's got wonderful orchestrations in it. I didn't realise quite how beautiful the orchestrations and the arrangements are on Barry's records. I always thought maybe he was a Philly soul artist, you know, with Gamble and Huff, but it's not. It's arranged by Barry White and Gene Page. I don't know who Gene Page is, but it's a really beautiful album. I can see why John doesn't like it, to be fair, but I do. And in fact, I think out of all these records, this is quite possibly my favourite of all the ones John gave me. So Barry, and I shall be doing a video at a future date showing the other Barry albums I've got, and in terms of whether I'm going to collect any more, that remains to be seen. Okay, so moving on. Now this was an interesting gift because I'm not a big Sting fan. I do really like the album The Soul Cages, which I've got very personal, fond memories of, you know, and but apart from that, I'm not a big Sting fan. In the UK, you know, Sting's critical reputation has been dreadful for years and years. He was kind of perceived as having lost his edge, I think, and he's now perceived as being a bit of a smug git. But I think I knew that this album was quite highly regarded. Now I think this is his debut album. John didn't think it was. I seem to remember a conversation we had. I said, "Is this his debut?" And I thought John said it wasn't, but it actually is. The first solo album released on the 1st of June 1985, and it is The Dream of the Blue Turtles, which I think is just the most wonderful name for an album. I actually wanted to own the album just because I loved the name so much. It's just, I don't know, it's just so kind of evocative. But I thought, I had a memory of reading somewhere that this was kind of like a jazz record. But it's not. It sounds like kind of late period Police. It's a bit blustery, you know. It's kind of quite widescreen, panoramic arrangements. But Sting is still demonstrating his kind of pop flair. There's a bit of a political thing coming through, so it kind of ties into the late police stuff. You know, you've got the song Russians and Children's Crusade, and my favourite song is probably the last song, Fortress Round Your Heart, which is just classic kind of, you know, kind of that mainstream, really good, tuneful pop music that Sting was so good at doing. Definitely pleased to get it. It's a collection stayer. It's an album I wanted. Not going to start buying, you know, Sting's albums, but it was a kind of strange piece of synchronicity on John's part, because it is a record that I was looking for, and I didn't expect him to suddenly present it to me. So there we go, Sting. Okay, so John also gave me this record, which is I think John has mentioned him in his own videos, Jose Feliciano, who I think is an Argentinian guitarist. Beautiful record, and let's have a look at the label for this one in case it's interesting. No, it's just Orange RCA. And this was a game of two halves, this record. I love his guitar playing. It's more bluesy than I thought it would be. And I love, he does all this really good kind of string bending stuff. Definitely some room for it in my collection. I'm a little bit undecided at the moment about his vocals. He sings in a very kind of loud, strident voice, and you know, he's not singing in English, obviously, so you don't really know what the songs are about. And I'm struggling a little bit with the vocals at the moment, but I do really like the guitar playing, and this is, you know, certainly a nice piece of esoterica, exotica for the collection. Now, John didn't give me this one on the steps of the museum, where incidentally we got moved on. It was quite funny. There was the museum steps in Lancaster tends to attract a kind of slightly sordid contingent of youths, you know, people who may be smoking drugs or you know, drinking from cans of lager. And the police actually turned up in a police van, and we're trying to move on, you know, move these kids on. And me and John, we were sat literally right next to them, so the police ended up moving us on as well, which I thought was quite funny. We were just kind of sat there looking at records, you know. Anyway, so this is not one of the ones John gave me on the steps. We went off to the Oxfam shop that I normally shop at, and John found a copy of an album that he has talked to me about in the past. This is Stormbringer by Deep Purple. And John told me this was a really, really great album. I've only got a little bit of Deep Purple in my collection. I have the Concerto for Group and Orchestra, and I have Machine Head. And John had mentioned to me that this was a little bit different, this album. It's Deep Purple's funky rock album. And apparently, you know, Ritchie Blackmore was not a fan of funky stuff, and he left the band, I think, after this record, because he wasn't very happy with the way, you know, that musical direction was heading in. But it's quite strange because he's so good at it. I mean, Ritchie Blackmore was one of the great virtuoso guitarists, you know, the 1970s and beyond. He had this incredible, fiery, classically orientated technique, you know, the metal and the fret shredding, but he could do it all. He could do blues, and he could do all sorts of things. And on this album, he just magically reveals that he can do kind of really great, kind of Jimmy Pagey, funky guitar playing. When I was after making some love, but I need more than the music to keep myself together. Oh, it makes me feel so good. I swear that there are some tracks maybe that have a kind of clavichord, almost kind of Stevie Wonder territory. Now this record, John sold it to me. He said it's interesting because I think he said it was the only time that David Coverdale worked with Glenn Hughes. Glenn Hughes bass guitar, David Coverdale on vocals, and I think they write together on the record, do they? I should have done some more research. but all vocals are sung by David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes, so there's a kind of two vocalists thing going on. Let me just see what I've got for you notes wise on this. It was their 9th studio album, released in November 1974. Soul and funk elements that were only hinted at on the Burn album are much more prominent. I haven't heard Burn. And apparently the album cover is based on a photo. In 1927 there was a tornado near the town of Jasper in Minnesota, and it was photographed by somebody called Lucille Hamburg. Her photograph has become a classic image, and it was used and edited for this album's cover. And the same photo was used for Miles Davis's album Bitches Brew, it seems, and the Susie and the Banshees album Tinderbox in 1986. And finally, just one extra bit of literary fact for you. Stormbringer, it refers to a Michael Moorcock novel. It's the name of a magical sword, which is described in many novels and comics by Moorcock and others, which enjoyed enormous success in the 1960s and 1970s. So there we go. I've done some research on this album. So I just had to change the record. It's on a rather fetching purple EMI label. The record is not actually in the best condition. It is incredibly crackly, so when I go to the record fair tomorrow in Leeds, I'm going to be looking for a better copy of it. There is actually, I think there's a purple vinyl reissue of it available, which I might look into. We'll see. But it's definitely a good, funky... I mean, you know, I say funky, it's not funky like Sly and the Family Stone. I mean, it's, you know, it's Deep Purple at the end of the day, you know. But I think because Ian Pace, the drummer, was one of those fantastic, great drummers who could kind of do everything. You know, he was so versatile, and so stylish. If you try to do this kind of album with maybe a slightly less funky drummer, I mean, you know, Cozy Powell, forget it. I mean, he's dead anyway. But you know, Ian Pace definitely knew how to do that kind of funky rock playing. It's not funk, but it's you know, funky rock. And yeah, I had no idea that Deep Purple had their funky side, but it seems they do. Okay, so to finish with, John gave me 4 albums by the same person, and that person is John Cougar, Mellencamp. And I can honestly say I have never heard a single song by this guy until I played these records that John gave me. Now, I think I got these in the right order. There's kind of gaps. This is 1982. This is American Fool. Then there was the album which Sean's Lock told me is a different cover in the US. This one is 1984. Yeah. So I mean, the album that everybody's talking about as being really great, John did not give me, and that one is Scarecrow, so I've not heard that one. This one is The Lonesome Jubilee, and this is 1987. Yeah. This is a gatefold. Jukebox on the back. And then finally this one, Big Daddy. This is 1989. So, yeah, and I've listened to all of them now, and yeah, I kind of, nothing has sort of jumped out at me as being like, wow, what a great song that is. You know, I've not heard a kind of, something that I can genuinely say, that is a fantastic song. It's all sort of, I find his stuff to be all kind of much of a muchness. It's well played. I do like I think he uses that kind of open G tuning that Keith Richards used, where all the guitar strings are ringing. It's got that kind of honky tonk women kind of sound, you know. Really great popping snare drum. It's kind of pumping American rock and roll music, you know. I mean, there's no shred of irony anywhere. It's all, you know, loving his baby in the back of his Cadillac, and where there's no kind of irony. It's in that school of maybe Springsteen-y, kind of almost creeping into Bryan Adams territory on occasions. It's not quite my cup of tea, but I've enjoyed these records enough that they're going to stay in the collection. I'm gonna keep them, and I'm gonna work at it a little bit, and maybe get hold of Scarecrow, either on vinyl or CD, if that's meant to be his best work. But yeah, thanks John, because like I said, I'd never heard this guy before, so it was a kind of gaping hole in my collection, or my knowledge. So it's always nice to fill those holes. And it's nice to acquire four records by somebody that you've never heard before. So it's like an instant collection, isn't it, in a way? Anyway, that's it. I would like to say thank you all for watching, and thank you once again to John for a lovely set of vinyl gifts there. No doubt after tomorrow we're all meeting up with this record fair tomorrow. There'll be more purchases. I've got tons of records to show you. I can make at least 3 or 4 vinyl finds videos between now and Christmas. I've got a lot to catch up on from my summer of digging, so that'll be coming up very soon. So in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check out John's channel, wonderful chap, and I'll put the link up there. And in the meantime, I'll take my leave. Take care folks, see you soon. Bye bye.